Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage our panelists discussing Winter is Coming Again. Can radical innovation together move the industry to springtime growth?
Hello, everybody. Okay, we're going to get started on our next panel. My name is Tom Johnson. I'm Managing Director of Dynata in the Americas. Nice to see you all. This is my first SampleCon. I got to tell you, where have I been the last 9 years? It's been so great to see so many former colleagues and people I've worked together. It just reminds me what a great industry this is, filled with just amazing people. So nice to see you all. Okay. So we're going to get into the next panel. I want to apologize first and foremost that I didn't bring drinks for my panelists. Everyone wants to be part of Bob's panel because he offers drinks. But by the way, Paul's order of a Caesar is highly questionable. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. Okay, so our panel, the title of our panel is The Winter is Coming Again. Can radical innovation together move the industry to springtime growth? So it's a great segue from the last panel, and we'll be hitting on a lot of the same themes that the last panel hit on over the next 45 minutes or so. So we welcome questions and comments. First, I do want to ask a question in the group. Have you ever been to an industry conference where you've talked about what market research needs to do to change and innovate? Anybody? Anybody? Oh, okay, most people. So here's what I'd love. If you hear a gem from this panel, which I know you will, let's talk about that at the end. And if we can grab onto that as an industry and actually make real change on something that you heard today, that would be a huge success. And we can stand up on the stage next year and talk about how together as an industry, we've together driven some change. All right, so let me start by making the introductions. So first of all, we have Katie Gross, who's Chief Customer Officer at Suzy. Next, we have Phil Fox, Director of Strategy at Numerator. Next, we have Jonathan Knight, COO, Kantar Profiles. And then finally, Eli Ackerman, COO at Grow Progress. So you're right in order with my list here, which is really impressive. So we're going to start with, each will do a little intro, and they're going to do 2 truths and 1 lie. Okay, so it'll make good cocktail conversations later tonight. So starting with you, Katie.
Yeah, so I am Katie Gross, Chief Customer Officer at the vertically integrated company Suzy, the token female on the panel. And also my favorite concert was Pearl Jam, by the way. 2 truths and a lie. So I was once driving through the middle of Rwanda with the Rwandan Freedom Army in the back of my car with AK-47s. I was arrested on a protest march in the Philippines. And I play the trumpet.
Well, 2 sound very exciting.
Phil Fox, Numerator, Director of Strategy, joined when we were InfoScout back in the day. Also vertically integrated, so I'm sure the 2 of us are going to have a lot of similarities in how we approach and think about panels. I'm going to go with 9 Inch Nails as best concert, so I'm going to talk with the guy from Dig from earlier. 2 truths and a lie. Let's see. I own 1 world record biking around Lake Michigan. Let's see. I am a Boy Scout, and I have driven an F1 Formula race car.
Well, they're getting bigger every time. I'm a little worried. So, hi, I'm Jonathan Knight, COO of Kantar Profiles. That's a new title for me because a year ago I was co-founder of Qmee. So my world has changed rather radically in the last year. We can talk about maybe a little bit about that on the panel. 2 truths and a lie. My favorite concert was The Clash in 1983 at the Hammersmith Apollo, where he smashes the guitar on stage, which then became the cover photo of London Calling. I was at school at the time, obviously, and I was then kept inside school for about 8 weeks and not allowed to go out at all as a consequence of that action. And the other thing is I was a semi-professional triathlete at one time, and I raced in the elite race at London Triathlon.
My name is Eli Ackerman. I'm COO of Grow Progress. We, for those who don't know us, we specialize in the politics and advocacy space, measuring public opinion for those kinds of decision makers. This is SampleCon number 8 for me, which is insane. 2 truths and a lie. I'll go small. First concert was the prolific one-hit wonder Chumbawamba. I'm allergic to dill, and I speak fluent Ghanaian Twi.
Interesting. What happens when you eat dill?
You'll have to find out if it's a truth or a lie.
Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. Let's jump right in. So, Katie, starting with you, right? What stops a market research firm from really growing and innovating today, as you see it?
So, speaking on the topic of from the last panel and also on our very long hike this morning, we talked about the industry really needs to have an understanding of return on investment. So I think one of the biggest challenges, not for a market research agency, but for market research as a whole, is really helping our clients, when I say clients, the brands themselves, evangelize a story of growth. It's not about getting opinions, getting feedback, which product should we launch, it's what happens then. So it doesn't really matter which product launches, it's how much money is that product going to actually make, and how does that brand tell that growth story to their senior leaders. And much like John Kay kind of mentioned this morning, it's not about less budget. And in fact, I have a client right now who told me she had a 15% increase in her budget this year. She reports to the chief growth officer of her company, not into the CMO, because she was able to tell a growth story. Because every single time she ran research, she not only stated it helped us decide, strawberry versus raspberry, and strawberry sold this amount, and strawberry helped us grow market penetration, and strawberry helped us grow household share, and that's why market research is important. And I don't think we do a very good job of that in the industry. We talk about ROI in particularly from an agile company, I can help save costs and save time and create more efficiency, but none of that matters if that company isn't making a lot more money because of that insight.
So what do you think holds us back from getting there today?
I think for most people in the room, here now I'm lucky enough to work with brands again, but I've worked at many panel companies where you are so disconnected from where that research goes, who then analyzes it, what happens to that research, not only what happens to the research, but then what happens to the product or the ad campaign that gets created. We're so disconnected that we don't even know what the ROI is. What product was launched? What did happen to that product? How much did it sell? How much extra household share did it push? For most people in this room, I doubt you have any idea what really happens to that research. And we don't ask the right questions.
Yeah.
What's funny is we all exist to ask and answer questions for our clients, yet we don't know exactly what they're doing with that research. I mean, one of the things that's taken place is, we go head to head, with many of you guys in the room trying to get a larger slice of that pie. We need a bigger pie. Right? That's what we as an industry needs to do, or we're going to be fighting in that zero-sum game. So how do we as an industry attack that problem together? That's something that we haven't figured out in the past. And if you look at Bob's slide earlier, talking about tech-enabled research, we've spent the last 20 years working with speed and access to addressing these questions. Now moving forward, the next 20 years are going to be defined of the quality of those experiences. So we've largely been working on speed, quality, and value, and asked our clients to pick 2. We're going to have to figure out how to pick 3 moving forward.
So tell us a little bit more about how do we expand that pie? What does that mean to you more specifically?
Well, to Katie's point, we need to better understand what our clients doing with what they're investing in us, right? They come to us, they tell us they have a business question, we address that, and we kind of move backwards. We haven't had teams of consultants, working within that to really understand that. So how do we become more consultative with them and also level up who we're engaging with at our client organizations? If we're putting out a 50-slide PowerPoint deck because we're just going through every question in a questionnaire, I can guarantee you that is not going to the chief growth officer or the chief marketing or chief sales officer. So how do we build that expertise and that comfort level to have those higher level discussions? Because frankly, that's where budgets are going to get set. Something that we have to do within our companies and probably as an industry to help tell that ROI story.
So, Jonathan, do you think the people that are in our industry, that are on the front lines, the sales teams that are engaging directly with clients, have that curiosity, that drive to understand what the goals and objectives are?
I think we've been very process-oriented. I think we've been very focused on how do we do this? How can we make it more efficient to do this? We're worried about our margin. We're worried about price point. We haven't been focused on the outcome enough. And I think if you compare us to the ad tech business, they're all about outcomes, right? Look at this great ROI you get from being on our platform. Look at this. And I think part of the issue is that we're actually in it's a difficult industry to manage because we have what should be a very deep consulting arm, but we also have this quite complex processing arm. And marrying those two things, as I've now discovered in my new world, marrying those two things into a business is actually quite hard. But I think Katie's absolutely right. We need to do a better job of that. We need to have those much higher level conversations if we're going to grow the pie in the way that online advertising has. And I think that should be our ambition.
Yeah, I totally agree. So for the audience, what are some thoughts or ideas of the ways that we can take action there to do things differently?
So, I mean, what we're doing is trying to specialize people, because I think a lot of people have been generalists, and I think that makes it quite hard to move. If you're deeply embedded in the process, how do you then step back and go, oh, I now need to do some analysis? That's a very difficult thing. And so we're trying to make people more specialists in the things that they do. And actually, there's pushback on that, because actually what I hear a lot is, oh, I like being able to touch this part and that part and that part. But I think people will find if they focus in on a value-added area, whether it's purchasing sample or doing the analytics or doing the insight part or selling, actually they'll be more productive. And at the end of the day, if we want to pay our people well, we need to make our businesses more productive.
Yeah, good. Eli, any further thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, just thinking about growing pie and pie growth and rising all boats. I think we have to increase the use cases for sample within research. You talked about the 50-page deck. It's horrific, and it creates it's the result of a horrific survey. And it's a costly survey to run as well. It's expensive for the buyer. We're focused on building products right now that allow researchers and our consultant customers to conceive of where they can build data-driven decision-making in more parts of their process. So running surveys where they wouldn't have otherwise thought they could or it would be advisable to run a survey.
What's an example of that?
Rapid response is a great one. Particularly for social media teams or social media responses where they think it's impossible to get an insight or to A/B test something that they're going to say in that kind of time frame. But actually, our industry is kind of purpose-built to help facilitate.
Yeah.
I think rapid response also isn't just about making faster decisions, but I was just with our Suzy advisory board last week, many of our clients, and they stated it's not even about just the speed, but if you have 6 weeks, yes, in the old world you could have done one survey. You still might have 6 weeks, but what you can do in that 6-week period is iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate. The packaging, the pricing, the naming, the claim, and iterate multiple times. So that speed is allowing you to do more in the same time frame, not just about shorter time frames.
We make that exact case to customers that they can test their whiteboard rather than self-censor to the same old ideas and test just those.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So staying on the same theme, Katie, what is it that if we're able to solve our clients' big business problems, that'll open up a lot more budget. Are we talking to the right people at companies today?
No. For the most part, no. You asked a question about salespeople. Obviously, I have been a salesperson. I've managed salespeople for most of my career. I think the challenge is we, as an industry, have changed so much. So particularly with sample, we were asking those sample salespeople to be quick mathematicians in their head. Incidence rate, can you get a price out? It was non-stop kind of taking calls, etc. It's a very different skill set to then, as we shifted towards selling APIs, it required a different type of salesperson. And some came along for the ride and others didn't. And now that we're selling things like vertically integrated panels on subscriptions, is once again, another shift and another change. So I think the hiring profile is difficult and tricky, but I think as leaders of sales teams, we have to help them come along for this ride as well, because we have to help train them to have those ROI conversations. And for me, it's actually the customer success managers. We were talking about this morning while we were knee-deep in water, literally, about when do we ask those questions to say, we don't want to go around our users, but when do we ask those questions about what happened to that research? Where did it go? What product did you launch? How much more market share were you able to gain from your competitor because you launched that product? And how do we then take that and shape that story and give that to the CMO? And the 50-slide deck is not going to be there, nor is it, we helped you select 17 new claims this year, because again, that's not what they're concerned about either. So no, I don't think we are talking to the right people in the right way.
Yeah, right. And getting to not only what does success look like, but even up front, how are you measuring success? What happens if you're not successful? What are the implications of that? I think that level of questioning is something that, from my point of view, I think we have huge opportunities for improvement. Yeah, that's good. Jonathan, talk a little bit about I guess I'm going to jump back a little bit back to the member experience and your experience with Qmee. How do we ensure, it's getting back to a lot of things that were talked about on the last panel, but how do we ensure we provide a really good frictionless experience for panel members?
I mean, our strategy was basically to throw out things that weren't working, and we have the luxury of doing that. Not everybody can do that, right? We allow them to give feedback. We frankly dress up the survey taking experience with a lot of other stuff that is a bit more fun. We do a thing called the daily poll, where users can see other people's responses, and we don't pay them for that. And what's really interesting about that is that actually when people give their opinion, right now we're in a paradigm where we give them money for that, one way or another. Actually, most of the time, for a lot of the users, the things they actually value the most, the interaction with us, are when they give us an opinion and they actually, it's similar to what Katie's saying, they actually hear back, why was that used, or what did that do, or I chose that color of shoe out of 4 choices. Did that end up going into production, or did other people prefer other shoes? So I think we're not actually treating I think we've got locked into this paradigm of cash, which is actually in a way quite unhelpful and causes a whole load of other problems that we're now struggling to deal with around quality. So one of the great things about moving from being a pure supplier to being an integrated player is that I think we can play around with those things a bit more.
Yeah.
And test that theory and see if I'm actually talking garbage or if there's something in there. But I think we need to respect why people answer questions. I think the other thing is actually, I was thinking about, what we were going to talk about today. We're on the cusp of actually extraordinary things. ChatGPT is, I know it answers some questions, but actually half the time it's talking garbage, but it's very convincing. But I think if you look forward 18 months, and it's not even, maybe it's not even 18 months, there's a new version coming out next year. I think a lot of these things are going to get solved, and I think we really need to think about what is our interaction going to be with people. Does a survey in its current form actually serve the purpose that we're actually trying to achieve, which is to understand why people do the things they do and have the opinions they have? So I actually think the next 10 years, if we come back, if I'm still here, SampleCon 20, I think we'll be looking back on really exciting things where we can interact with people in a much more fluid way. So those are the things that we're thinking about. And it's pretty exciting, actually. And I think last 10 years have been about building a foundation for us to be able to do all those things.
Great.
And just jump in there on the respondent experience. I obviously completely agree with you. They also need to see, where did my opinion go? Meaning they'll be more excited about their opinion being heard again the next time, etc. Controversial potentially in this room, but I think the unit economics are wrong in our industry right now. So I worked at a couple panel companies previously, and I remember our chief research officer, John Bremer, on stage stating, you don't need to do 2,000 completes. What you need is a statistically significant sample size. And I'm like, but we sell on sample sizes. Shh, don't tell everybody. So he's completely right. Now that I've kind of circled back to that, you need a sample size that is statistically significant. I always struggle with the word, which means you are utilizing that same budget and getting more for it. So they will. So the question earlier on the panel was, will John Kay pay for it? Yes, they will pay for it. He doesn't need 1,000 completes. He may only need 500 completes, in which case he can pay double the price for it. But not only that, one of the reasons I joined Suzy is because we have flipped the model on its head. So we charge our clients a cost per question. We pay our respondents for every single question they answer, so our unit economics are nice and even, which means clients aren't trying to ask 45-minute surveys. They're trying to be responsible with the questions that they're asking and thoughtful with the questions they're asking. And our respondents aren't incentivized to try and get to the end of the survey because they know that if they turn out, they're getting paid for the question. That unit economic means that we have great quality and our clients aren't trying to ask 45-minute surveys. So I know that we are in a CPI world, but I think it's potentially causing us a lot of issues, and it might be time to start looking at a different.
So I love the concept.
Can I jump in?
Yeah,
on
please.
That? You know, I find a lot of issues with unit economics because on stage everybody's sort of in agreement. You know, long surveys are bad, short surveys are good. You can derive a lot of value from short surveys. They're better for respondents. They're more engaging. You get higher quality because respondents don't hate you by the end. But I have found, having purpose-built a survey instrument that is designed to be as short as the industry really allows, that there are a lot of players in this space that cannot price for a survey that short. Rather, that the price for a 90-second survey is the same price as an 8-minute survey. And I think there is a lot of sort of people not putting their money where their mouth is on that topic to price, to penalize length and to reward brevity.
So how do we change the dynamic?
It's interesting because, when we came into I come from a completely different industry. I come from financial services. And when I first looked at the price curves in this industry, I was going, okay, this is pretty interesting. People are pricing 8-minute surveys at the same price they're pricing 2-minute surveys. I love that. So actually, we found that to be a huge opportunity. The IR is another thing. It doesn't make any sense to me, IR pricing, but great. If people want to do IR pricing, I love it. So I think, but what we have found is actually the price curves have actually changed a fair bit in the last couple of years. I think that has shifted. I think, unfortunately, there are people who have very high fixed costs, and they really struggle with those shorter surveys. And part of becoming more efficient is about driving down that fixed rate so that we can tip the curve. So if someone wants to do a 30-second survey, 2-question survey, we've got the chance to do that at a reasonable price. So I think it's getting better. We're probably not perfect yet, but I think the market is solving that problem, actually.
Yeah, that's good. And do you think we're appropriately pricing when it's done programmatically versus when it's done managed services? Do we have the right pricing model there? Any thoughts?
No, and I think to your point earlier, particularly the exchanges struggle with short surveys. They also flood the quotas because we, for global work, we own our own panel in the US, and for global work, we integrate to an exchange. And the quotas are flooded because we have one of the best surveys out there for suppliers. So it's really difficult to kind of nuance that.
I mean, we have a tragedy of the commons, right? What's another question? What's, another 1,000 people that we throw at this? Fine, we're going to term all these people, and people will quit halfway through, but there's always more sample. So at Numerator, we don't do the IR game. If you want to go to this specific person that bought this stick of gum at 7-Eleven yesterday, we can do that. right? And we think about the advertising industry, they've gotten really good at precision marketing. Why can't we do the same thing? Why can't we do the same thing in terms of what we already know regarding our panelists? What do we need 45 minutes of screeners and profile questions? I learned a long time ago when I was at Nielsen, we were using the National Consumer Panel, which was a joint venture with IRI. It was mutually assured accountability. We weren't allowed to ask all these different questions because the other would say no. So we got used to those short questionnaires, and we never asked the same question twice. If we renew the answer, that was just part of the deliverable in and of itself. So we've conditioned our panelists to believe that their time does not matter. We've also conditioned them to believe that their opinion does not matter. And that's something that we fundamentally have to change. If they can answer a question that only they can answer, they're a little bit more inclined to share that thoughtfully. And that's something that we've learned at Numerator. I mean, let's be honest. How many times this week have you guys gotten a solicitation for taking a survey about your United flight or this meal that you got or what have you? Occasionally, I'll take that survey to just, I don't know, competitive intelligence. What fresh hell am I going to go through for the next 25 minutes? And I get halfway through and I'm like, Jesus, this sucks. I can't believe we ask our panelists to do the same thing. I think that is something that we could do indefinitely. We're going to have a reckoning if we keep doing this because there's no disincentive for us as an industry to not ask one more question, one more invite. And that's not sustainable.
Unless you price per question, in which case he'll stop asking it. But there was a panel of panelists sat right here last year, and it's not only if we condition them that we don't care about their time or their opinion, we don't trust them. And that's what she said. This one woman, and I'll never forget it, she was like, I belonged to the same panel for 10 years, and you have asked me my age, my gender, or my region every single time. She's like, do you not know this? I've been telling you the same answer for 10 straight years. And she's like, and not only that, you asked me at the beginning of the survey, and you asked me at the end of the survey, and I don't understand. And I think the moderator tried to defend it a little bit by saying, well, we're just trying to make sure that you're accurate with both your answers. She's like, I've been on your panel for 10 years, you still don't trust me? And that's a tragedy.
Your birthday's never going to change.
Yeah.
Just ask it once and just assume that they were truthful the first time, because chances are they're going to be less and less truthful the 25th time you ask it.
This is another example where I think as an industry we sort of take for granted that we're all on the same page about this except for the researcher, right? You know, every panel, company, manager, anybody that's involved on the supply side of this business would love to just pass through zip code and age and gender so that the respondent wouldn't have to then be asked it again on the survey side. Well, I've tried to build a survey side product that can trust the demographic variables that the supplier sends in advance of the respondent or after the respondent. But if we do a consistency check between the gender we just received from the supplier and the gender that the respondent gives us right then and there, it's not perfect. It's not even close to perfect. And if you do that for all of the other 3 to 5 basic demographics, the percentage of people that come through clean in that is not good enough. It's not even close to good. So that's something that this industry could solve, but already thinks it has.
I'm going to defend the exchanges slightly there, because we do take a lot of that information from the exchanges and we have the quality measure on our platform. I'm not saying that just feel free to send us trash and we'll clean it, but I think that it's also on us as platforms to also make sure that we are putting in the correct kind of mousetrap, as it were, when those exchanges are sending us the sample, and then we can trust the data that's coming through. Is it going to be perfect? Probably not. But it's more perfect than 20-minute long surveys where the respondent's not even thinking about the question by the time they get to question number
What's interesting
27 anyway.
is why is someone coming through saying they're one gender when they're so what is happening there in the recruitment process that's driving, because that's sort of a hard thing to understand, right? That they couldn't pick their birthday or their year of birth or something.
Just a simple failure to refresh that data or to validate which respondent you even have in the first place.
Or is it that we're recruiting people and then they're going, well, I don't want to give you my real data because I don't know what this is.
There's a privacy.
Yeah, and,
for sure.
and so I'm not. So maybe that's part of the issue, because if you're someone who's never done this, why would you trust it at all?
I mean, when you guys go to an alcohol website and they ask you to put in your birthday, do you put in your birthday? No, you just put in the fastest thing you can to just get past that screener. Again, we've conditioned our panelists to just want to get the cheese at the end of the maze, and we put all these mousetraps in. And it's a fundamental, terrible user experience.
That's right. So are there other options for us using technology and other things that can help drive a different way, using AI, using other approaches rather than the same old way of doing things? Any thoughts there?
Yes. I mean, I think the challenge for the sample industry is if it's not going to be good enough for platforms like ours to buy it, we're going to go build our own, which we did. And we're like, you know what, let's just build this completely differently, build a panel in the way that we would want to build a panel. And luckily, we're only a 5-year-old company, so we were able to do that. But that's the existential threat also, is that companies like ours are just going to go to the market and say, this is just not clean enough, I'm going to go build my own instead.
Right. And what was the premise when you built your own? Like, what did you want to make sure that you got just right?
Not having to worry about incidence rate, because you ask a brand what the incidence rate is of their product, they have no clue. And incentivize short surveys by charging them per question so they wouldn't go for 27, just one more question. They're much more thoughtful about what they're asking and why they're asking it.
Yeah, got it. Good.
I mean, with Numerator and InfoScout, when we created the Receipt Hog app, that was our business, is understanding behavior. So we didn't want to change their behavior. We wouldn't bias them in any way. When we started doing survey on top of that, that was a smaller part of our business. Now, if we're trying to understand purchases over time, if we churn that panelist out, they're not as helpful to us. So we got it down to about a 3% churn rate in terms of monthly active users. And if we started going into surveys, and I'm sorry, if we started shitting the bed for ourselves and asking 45-minute surveys, and I'm like, you know what, I don't like giving you our receipts. I used to give you 25 receipts a week, and then you make me go through 25 minutes of this garbage? Well, that's on us. So we were incentivized to not mess with that in any way. Now, that's not necessarily the way survey panels in general work. You could just replace them. You could just get another person. But if you invest enough time in understanding that individual respondent, the idea of losing them, that cost will be so high that it's going to self-correct. So either we do this now, or we do it later. But those that are vertically integrated right now will figure it out first.
Yeah. Good. Let's shift a little bit to B2B. So we have definitely seen that B2B has moved from a little bit more quant to a little bit more qual. Obviously, the expert networks have come on. I think, Jonathan, one thing we've seen a lot of, right, is that rather than paying, they're now sharing the transcript data from these calls back to the people that are taking these calls and offering their opinion. I think that's seems highly valuable and is engaging respondents. It seems that the more we can engage them and provide something of value back that's more than, say, 50 cents for doing a survey, the more success we're going to have. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely something we're exploring. It's interesting. In the last couple of years, I've been invited onto a couple of those expert panels, and I sort of tested the waters to see what it's like and what's the experience like. And you do a 45-minute interview, and they claim they pay you. I'm not sure that the money's actually ever arrived, but you know, the experience is interesting because it is totally different from what we do in the quant world. But I think the way out of this is going to be a blend of quant and qual, and I think the ability of machines to understand language gives us the ability to extract data at scale from those answers. I think, so I'm really excited, actually. I think there's huge potential to blend the approaches. So I guess when you go to journalism school, it's not something I've done, so I'm sort of making this up, but the first thing you're supposed to write in an article is, you know, Amy, aged 8, lost her kitten, you know, on Friday, and cat crime has become a big deal, right? You're supposed to personalize the thing right up front because that's what sells it. And I think part of our issue as an industry is we haven't had that personal story to sell the data. So I think if we can combine those two things together, that gives us those hooks where you can go to the CEO and say, you know what, Amy's lost her cat. There's a big opportunity in cat GPS collars or whatever it is that we're doing. So, you know, I think there's the platform that we have built is actually amazing when you think about it. To be able to ask questions and get thousands of answers within sometimes minutes around the world in however many different countries that we are all in, I mean, actually, that's pretty incredible when you think about it. But I think that is step one of another journey. And I think, as I said, the next 10 years, I think, are going to be pretty interesting. But I think we're going to have to be innovative. I think we're going to have to combine things together that don't necessarily sit together right now. I think combining the Numerator shopping data with some of the stuff we get from people is, for example, a very interesting opportunity.
Sounds like business.
Yeah, so there you go. So there's a business love-in going on over here. So I think it's going to be those types of things because, as Katie says, we don't have to ask 2,000 of the same responses. I think we need enough to start to put our pin on the ground and then go, okay, how do we get more richness in this?
Yeah.
So that's where I think it's coming. And the integrated companies, frankly, are better placed to do that because we have the resources to pull things together. So I think that will be the competitive threat for maybe smaller people. But I think it's exciting. I think we've got a great story to tell. And with first-party data becoming more and more important, this is going to be the future, I think.
Yeah, I think the innovation in qual, adding qual cleans your panel, first of all, because we launched video open-ends, and I won't say we were kind of like fingers crossed, we're like, this is going to be a real test of the quality of our panel, because those respondents are going to be answering those questions with their face on the screen. And again, now we have a great kind of testament to the great quality is we're more than happy for our DIY clients to launch video open-ends and video IDIs because we completely trust the respondents as well. And talking about the bigger pie, that's how we start getting a bigger pie. New use cases they wouldn't have done before. They didn't have time for qual, but now they do because we have video open-ends that can be easily added in to start expanding the size of that pie. And that is also how we start talking to CMOs because they see that 2-minute video of a consumer and they're kind of like, holy shit, that's literally my consumer. There was a fantastic one I had recently. I was asking an energy drink question. The guy referenced my favorite brand is Bang Energy because it's banging flavors. And like the head of insights like, I love this, my CMO is gonna love this. And you just wouldn't get that in a survey. Even in a text open end, it just wouldn't hit the same way that it's got banging flavors hit on that video.
So Phil, what should we be doing? So there's a lot of, right now we have some economic headwinds, the world's changing, right? What do we do to future-proof the market research industry today? So you talked about expanding the pie. Can you talk a little bit about how that would apply to what we do today to future-proof for tomorrow?
Well, anytime there's uncertainty, we have to be the industry that provides those answers, right? So, I mean, we're well positioned to fill that gap. So one of the areas that we've been looking into at Numerator is just being more involved in economic commentary, if you will, right? So if we understand the consumer sentiments regarding inflation or the economy, then, and at the same time we already have their behavior, then we could have an understanding of what will happen next, right? The past 10 years, we've talked about speed and access to those insights. Now we can start thinking of, okay, like we already have that speed. Now can we start thinking about what's gonna come next? So how do we understand those indicators? We didn't necessarily think about that in the past. It was just one project at a time, just trying to understand what happened in the past. We need to understand what's gonna happen next.
Yeah, that's good. All right, Eli, any thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I mean, if we can't sell into volatility, what are we doing? I mean, volatility is the best environment for research and insights.
So I think this takes us back to where we started this conversation, right? Are we really hitting the bullseye when it comes to solving our clients' problems? And are we significantly making an impact to help them move forward? Because if we are, you're right. We should be recession-proof and in a great spot to help clients migrate their way through that. But I would say a lot of companies in this room are struggling right now, right? It's a tough economic time. So do you think it's back to what we started talking about? We're not connecting the dots like we really need to. We've got so much to provide, yet we're not helping our clients see that and hitting the bullseye.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not quite so optimistic. And Seema had mentioned it too. We should be selling into that. It's uncertainty. We can provide certainty. We can de-risk, et cetera, et cetera. What's happening right now, and obviously we work with brands, is those brands are losing their budgets, losing their teams. They're being reorged like no other, and they are laying people off. So some of the largest soft drinks companies in the world are laying off very large teams of insights consumers. So I would love to sell into uncertainty, but if my people are being reorged and not even there anymore, it's really challenging. And
so what's the strategy? What is the strategy now to make your way the best you can through this environment?
So for us, we are doubling down on helping our clients understand that ROI story and also listening. So we have a Suzy advisory board where we listen to our clients. So we make sure that we're kind of preaching our own kind of song, as it were, by bringing them in. You tell us what's happening with your budgets, what you're being pressured with, what does your CFO need to see from this, and how can we help you? I don't want you to lose budget. I don't want you to be reorged. I don't want your team to be viewed as just spending money on insights. How can I help you? And I think we really, really have to listen, and everybody in the room has to really understand, why are they conducting the research? It's to increase penetration, steal from a competitor, increase household share, increase prices in certain cases as well. And exactly how do we play into that growth story to help them tell that story?
Yeah. And should we even go to the CFO and tell that story directly, potentially?
Yeah, very potentially.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, we, as an industry, we are vendors, except we want to be partners, right? As a vendor, you're very reactive. As a partner, you get to be a little bit more proactive, right? And I feel like as methodologists and research specialists, we're selling possibilities, what we could do. Here's a bullet point list of all the methodologies we could do. I feel like a trench coat, opening up and check out all these watches.
You want to max this if I got one?
I just need to tell, you just need to tell the time, right? So how do you elevate those conversations with our clients? So to Katie's point, we talk way too much about ourselves. We need to hear about their problems. What are they trying to solve for? What can I do to help you get there? I have all the tools. Trust me, I have the trench coat with all the watches in it. But what do you need? And once we can have those kinds of conversations, as an industry, we're going to do a lot better.
Yeah, yeah. And what does that take? What does that take to change the dynamic? Do we need to, could we create an industry consulting group that would help sort of the whole industry understand this better? Should we leverage outside consultants to come in and help us how to sell and position business solutions better?
I mean, we're still trying to figure that out within our four walls. I mean, I'm curious, everyone in the room, how long does it take for you guys to get a new commercial leader up to speed on everything that you guys do? Is it 6 months? Is it 12 months? I mean, we're trying to figure out, do we need a research boot camp so you could talk effectively about what we're trying to do? And do I need you to understand exactly when and how to use a max diff? I mean, you should have specialists that come in the door for that. And that was the point made earlier. We are generalists, but at what point do we start specializing folks within our company so that we can have those discussions and not get mired down in all that minutia?
Yeah. Before coming into this industry, I spent 15 years at Gartner, and that was an interesting experience because you come in as a young salesperson and you get in front of a CIO, and the only thing you can do is ask questions. And it's kind of Columbo-style questions, like, why is that important? What are the ramifications for that? Tell me more about it. Do you have the team to do it? But it's amazing how it can uncover what that person, when they get in their car and they drive home at night, they're worried about something personally in their job. And if I can uncover what they're worried about and provide a solution back to them to help them solve that problem, then you have a trusted and valued partnership for a long time there. And it's not about telling them what you know about technology, because you don't know anything about it. Unfortunately, in this industry, a lot of us, including the sales folks, know a lot about it. So I think they talk a lot about it. Anyway, Jonathan, any thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I think I think to be honest, I think it's going to be quite a tough time, I have to say. That's my personal view. I'm looking at the yield curve and it's not looking happy. But I think we need to reset ourselves through this. I think there's been a lot of work on automation and being able to deliver at lower prices, so I think that'll help us through. The question is, at the back end, can we really take advantage of the machinery that we have all built? So I think that's the way I'm thinking about it. So I think it is going to be, unfortunately, a little bit, it's going to be a little bit bumpy. But I think we should hang on to the fact that we have an amazing machine for answering questions.
Yeah, right. And no time's better than the present to get going on that, right?
Absolutely.
Eli, any final thoughts here?
I lean on that amazing machine. I'm trying to purpose-build products to take advantage of those core strengths. And rather than have a customer come and tell us what they think they want, we try to market what we know we can do really, really well and what problems that solves for them. Because a lot of times they're trying to solve their own problems without that expertise. And so, to try to wrap with what I thought was just a really core point, it is an ROI that they're looking for at the end of the day. It is the insight that they need, not the research that they've structured to get it.
Great. Okay, so we're about out of time. I guess we can open up some questions in the audience. And if you have questions, come right up to the microphone if you wouldn't mind, so we can hear you loud and clear.
Good afternoon. My name is Mansoor Fahimi from Marketing Systems Group. Related to the need for increasing the share of the pie, which I think it's an excellent idea, and if I can put a shameless plug, there is a panel tomorrow and I will be talking about that. But I find it interesting that you mentioned perhaps we should elevate ourselves and instead of being simply a vendor, become a research partner, talk to our clients about MaxDiff, conjoint, whatever. My question for you is, are we not then encroaching upon market researcher? Are you saying that we should change and instead of being a sample vendor, grow and be a market researcher?
It depends on who you ask. Obviously, Phil and I work directly with brands. Well, actually, probably all of us work directly with brands. And I don't think it's about cutting out the market researcher, but actually making them look like a champion. I worked with one in the beauty and personal care industry recently. She started using our platform to help with all of her sales managers selling into retailers. She looked like a superhero. In that room, she was like, look at this cool tool that I have uncovered that's helped us sell more into Costco, and this has been the value. And I made her basically look like the market research hero in front of all of her leadership team. So I think it's actually about working very closely with the market researcher and making them the hero of the story, but we have to listen to them first and then work with them as a partner to say, let's together go to see your CMO or your head of sales or your chief growth officer. And so it's like really partnering with them so that you can both present together upwards. Then they also get promoted too, which one of my clients did very recently, so I was very proud of her.
But I do think there are probably also circumstances where your partner in market research is a blocker. And you have to acknowledge that reality, and you don't have to sell against them per se, but there are other buyers at these big organizations and communications teams and government affairs and social impact and social media, and you can sell direct to them. What's stopping you?
I would also say that market research firms, the most interesting conversations I have, and I think a lot of folks on my team have, is when we try to understand what's that market research firm trying to do? Where are they looking to expand? Are they focused on top line? Are they focused on bottom line? How are they making those decisions? Can we partner? And we're fortunate at Dynata to have the size and scale, I think, in a lot of cases to be able to do this. But how can we partner to help that market research agency hit their objectives? And again, it's along the lines of the same thing we're talking about, which is really asking questions and being curious and trying to understand what that particular firm is trying to accomplish, and then really lining up behind that to set them up. And then it's a win-win.
I mean, I suspect it's not necessarily leapfrogging the market research partner that you have, but it's probably elevating the relationship that you have with that agency or that company. In the same way, we're trying to elevate those conversations with brands. So it's just up-leveling the conversations you're having with, again, your partners.
Yep. Yep. Any other questions?
Yeah, appreciate all the conversations here. Phil, I believe it is, right? Numerator. This one's directed to you. You had said something about panelist retention, and I'm just curious about some of the specifics on how and what tech stacks you're using to really encourage and retain that retention. 3%, pretty impressive, being the churn rate. We're not quite there yet, but pretty close. So I'm curious as to what you're doing through maybe the app or other systems that you have to really bring that home?
Really wish I had my lead engineer with me here to comment specifically on the tools that we're using there. So when I said the 3% churn rate, we have 500,000 people that use our app on a monthly basis, and about a third of that have been with us for 12 months consecutive, right? And that's what we use for measurement. So it's the 3% on that group that we just cannot afford to lose, to be honest. And it really comes down to how simple and straightforward that app experience is with no surprises. They need to know what to expect. And one thing that we learned 5 years ago, whenever we would aggregate up our sales data from the things that you're buying on that receipt, every time the sales were down, no matter what we did. Over time, sales were always down. What we realized was the first year of a panelist, they would give us 35 receipts a week. A year later, they gave us 34 receipts a week. So that like 2 or 3% change in behavior had a fundamental change on how we were able to measure what consumers bought. And so just the baseline need for us to make that app experience consistent was personified by that decline. So we were very strict in terms of what we allowed on and off our receipt hog engagement. That's why we've never let third parties kind of change what that experience was. Because again, you're going to get that tragedy of the commons situation where you're like, you know what, just send it out to 10,000 more people, and why not ask 5 more profiling questions? So we were able to be very strict with how consistent we were with those permissible survey guidelines.
Appreciate it.
Okay, any final questions? Okay, I think that's it. Thank you very much.